One of the teas that I loved and got me into drinking tea Gongfu style was Jinjun Mei, which is the Gold Bud black tea, or red tea if you're using Chinese. But over the last 5 years, as I've started to drink higher quality oolongs, white teas, pu'ers, green teas, I've stopped wanting to drink black tea. It didn't feel like they had the same depth, the same bell curve in the flavor profile, if that makes any sense at all. And after 2 years of really not liking any black teas at all, I finally have a solution. I say solution, it's not really a solution. It's more of just a preference for me that's got me excited about drinking red or black teas for the first time in years. Because we won't need any teapots in this video, I figured it would be a good time to go over my favorite teapots from this year, starting with this one. Now, this one's a no-brainer, a flat boy, obviously because of its crazy shape. But even more than this one is the original one that it was inspired after, which is from Chaozhou. Now, Chaozhou is definitely a less popular, less famous city than, say, Yixing. But the one thing that all Chaozhou pots have in common is they're all made with red clay and they're all made around 100 milliliters. So since the clay and the size are about the same, the only thing they can change is the shape. And I knew that the shallow form was going to make it harder to clean. Some of my friends, like Mark, sorry Mark, will say that I'm being a bit of a muppet and that I complain when really it shouldn't matter how easy a pot is to clean out. And I've put down and stopped liking pots because they're not easy to clean. Surprisingly though, because it's glazed on the inside and the thickness is deep enough for me to get my finger in to like windshield wiper the inside of the pot and get the leaves out, it's actually pretty easy to clean. But that's definitely not the coolest part. The best part about this pot for me was feeling how grounded and sturdy it is because of the low center of gravity. It's not always going to make sense, and frankly, it's normally not going to make sense to have the center of gravity this low, but what it does show you is how comfortable it is to have a pot that is heavier on the bottom, that's slightly weighted towards the bottom, bringing the center of gravity down and making it more comfortable to use. Now, while this pot has had me excited this year, remember, the whole premise of this video is that red teas haven't had me excited. And the reason for me on that is because my experience drinking red teas has been, well, boring, which is also unfortunate because it's the flavor that people are most familiar with if they've heard of tea. And don't get me wrong, I still love seeing people's eyes light up when they get excited and they have the first steep Gongfu style, when they're surprised at how much tea you're putting in or how quick the steep is, and seeing their eyes light up. It is fun. But I haven't enjoyed the fact that these teas have really just tasted very linear for me, nothing special, unlike this next pot. This is my second favorite teapot from the year, and in no particular order. This is just one of the few. And actually looking at this makes me realize it's not the perfect pots that I have that are my favorite from the year. In fact, I think that this lid is a little bit weird. The design's a little bit weird, maybe not as well thought through. The ratios of the handle, the spout, the variants on the lid button are all very good. So it's not a bad pot, it's just, I feel like the form isn't perfect. But it's still one of my favorites. Because of the ball filter, it has really smooth pores, and the hammered texture is really satisfying. It's just an extra little tactile sensation when you're pouring with this. But honestly, I do really like the white Zhenshui clay better than the black Zhenshui clay. One thing for me though that makes a pot feel like it's not really well considered is if the ratios don't change with the size of the pot. And this one and the white version actually are a really good example. They both have the same size spout, but this one pours a lot faster and the white one pours a lot slower because the ratio wasn't changed for the size of the bigger white pot. Like I said, I prefer the white clay, but because the ratios are off on the white one, I actually find myself reaching for this one more. Let me geek out for a minute on this. So when we get new pots in for Tao Teaware, I do measurements for all the dimensions of the pots, but I also measure the pour time for each of the pots. And after testing, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of these pots, I've started to get a feeling for what feels right in a pour, how long it should take. And that's actually why I stopped recording Gaiwan times, because pretty much all Gaiwans pour out in about 2 seconds. But whether a teapot is 200 milliliters, 250, or down to 70 to 100 milliliters, on average, they should pour between 6 and 10 seconds. Not a rule, just an average. It's just what's come to feel natural after pouring a bunch of pots. But back to this pot, which is 200 milliliters, so not small by any means for Gongfu standards. This pours out in 4.5 seconds. Crazy fast. It's actually my fastest pouring teapot, and it's not small at all. So the reason that I like this one is because it falls out of standards in a good way. I would say a teapot that pours in 5 seconds is fast, and the fact that this pours in less than 5 seconds and is big is just really cool. Getting back to the black tea though, with the Gongfu tea sessions, I've grown accustomed to having some of the teas take 2 to 3 steeps to open up. Primarily, any pressed tea, white teas, pu'ers typically, and then other teas that will be good to go, ready to drink the first steep. Dancong oolongs, green teas, etc. But what I don't expect with these teas is for any of them to start mild and be at the peak of the tea experience. So a tea that is good first steep will not be mild, whereas a tea that needs a couple steeps to open up, well, we are not at the peak until steep 5, 6, 7, 8, creating that bell curve in the flavor. But for black teas, I've felt that they were mild in the beginning and they haven't opened up. So they started mild and stayed mild. And I like subtle teas. Like for example, there's some Fuding white teas that on a day where I'm working, it doesn't really taste like there's much. And I know it's just because I'm not paying attention to the tea. But for all red teas that I've tried across the board, it just felt like they were mild. Whether I was paying attention or not, it just didn't seem like there was a lot there. Now, I've tried brewing at lower temperatures, adding more tea, pretty much everything that I could think of to try and get more out of it and wasn't able to. So if you have a recommendation, let me know down below if it's not the thing that I'm getting at here in a minute. My last favorite teapot of the year ties in pretty well with what we're talking about here, is this pot from Master Cummins' Apprentices. And it actually makes the list for the same reason that I'm having trouble with red teas. This is the cheapest, best quality handmade teapot that also has character that I've been able to find thus far. The thin walls and no-touch lid give it character. The spout, lid button, and handle proportions are really nice. The thicker center of the lid and lid button also show extra consideration put into the shape. And the big opening makes it easy to get tea in and out of. Mark, I know, it doesn't matter. So to sum it up, I love this pot because it has the character of a more expensive pot at a cheaper price point, which you don't always get. And some of the time it's not possible. Actually, a lot of the time it's not possible. And my recommendation for anyone who says they want to try higher quality tea or better tea is to find a vendor they trust and buy a more expensive version of a tea that you're already familiar with or somewhat familiar with. But this also didn't help with these black teas. I got a number of teas that were $1 per gram or higher. And those for me, that's the height. That's artisan level. Those are premium teas. You should not be getting teas that are $1 per gram that are not premium, that are not very good. But still, nothing. All right, so enough beating around the bush. The style of tea or the way of brewing that's made me excited to start drinking black or red teas again is grandpa style. Actually, that's not true. I think when most people say grandpa style, they don't actually mean grandpa style, myself included. So the term comes from Chinese middle-aged, slightly over middle-aged, men in their 40s and 50s basically, who put tea in a thermos, typically glass, at the beginning of the day, add hot water, and then add more leaves. Add hot water, add more leaves, add hot water, add more leaves, add hot water, add more leaves. But for other people and myself, when we say grandpa style, typically what we mean is putting loose leaf tea in a glass thermos and maybe drinking 1, 2, or 3 steeps, not necessarily keep adding more tea. Regardless though, I think the reason that it's helped me to like black teas more and appreciate them more is a little bit interesting. Typically higher quality teas, we wanna pull out the nuance, and that's why we brew Gongfu style, right? To get the experience, to get some flavors that open up and aromas and things that change. But I feel like red teas aren't as potent as some of the other teas. And so the nuance may be there, but it's harder for me to taste. And so I kind of appreciated just having it more compact, more consolidated, more flavor all at once, like when I'm brewing it grandpa style. Which also goes into my thought on these guys, the tea resin from Jesse's Tea House. If you wanna hear more about my thoughts on these, because I think some of these are worth trying and some of them not so much, so I would probably skip the sampler. If you wanna know more about that, let me know down in the comments and maybe I'll make a video on it. But it's time for me to go drink more tea.